I'm scared to tell my brother about my sister's creep boyfriend. Plus one update, I think he might flip on the 40-year-old creep. We grew up without a father and our mother is very sick/struggles with substance issues. My older brother, 25, practically raised me, 19, and my sister, just turned 18. We still live in my mother's house, however she may as well not even be there. My brother lives with his girlfriend on the other side of town. Well, here is the issue we have. My sister recently brought an older guy over to our house to watch a movie. He's around 40 years old. I mean, he seems nice enough on the surface, but the age gap and the fact she only recently turned 18 really rubbed me the wrong way. Not even sure how he could bring himself to go into an 18-year-old's house. I've spoken to her about it and she said they hadn't done anything intimate except kiss, and she said she isn't in any rush to. She reckons he loves her. Yeah right, lol. And she loves him. She's never gone past kissing before and is much more innocent than I was as a teen. My sister hasn't had a boyfriend before, and whilst she isn't stupid, I feel she is easily manipulated due to her personality and naiveness. I went over to my brother's house the day after whilst he was at work and spoke to his girlfriend, 25, about it. She seemed disgusted by the whole thing but also concerned about telling my brother. Whilst she agreed it had to be done, she said it was important it's done properly. She agreed not to do it without me. Bit of info about my brother as I feel it's relevant for this. He's an amazing guy to us. He went above and beyond, sacrificing his teenage years to make sure we got what we needed, even if his means were less than legal. His first trouble with the law was at 19 for stealing to pay for my school dance trip. We never wanted for anything. We always had presents under the tree and a nice meal at Christmas, thanks to him. Always made sure we had gifts on our birthdays and would take us out to dinner even if he couldn't afford to order anything himself. We rarely missed a school trip as he'd always find a way to make it work. His girlfriend has told me that he puts a little bit of money aside each month for our eventual wedding dresses. I honestly couldn't have asked for a better big brother. I know all the pressure had an effect on him. That's the kind of guy he is. No sacrifice for us was too big. He's a big guy who regularly spends time in the gym after work. He's also associated with some rather unsavory characters. Whilst he has never ever so much as raised his voice at us, I've seen him go absolutely ape at some people before. A notable example is when I was 17, my then boyfriend smacked me and he was completely enraged. If my then boyfriend wasn't also a minor, I reckon he would have unalived him. He's very protective of us and I think sees us as his own children and his responsibility. It is because of this that I doubt he will act calmly about a full-grown man grooming his little sister. Whilst the possibility of anger worries me, his girlfriend was also worried about him getting sad, feeling like he didn't protect her as well as he should have / feeling like a failure. She said we need to be really careful about how we tell him this. My little sister asked me not to tell him, but there is no way I could do that. Plus his girlfriend already knows and is going to have more loyalty to him than to my little sister, so he's going to find out regardless of what I do. She said tonight when he gets home from work is probably the time to tell him. I guess what I'm asking is, how do we tell him? I wish none of this had happened. I'm so anxious about the whole thing. I really don't want my big bro to be hurt and I don't want him to do anything stupid to the guy and get himself in trouble. I'm really lost here. Update 1. When I told him, he was crying really hard. We decided to put a pause in the conversation so that he would do something he regrets. Notice sis was a bit upset when she came home last night and after some pushing she told me what was up and it kind of broke my heart. This is obviously a bit weird for me to type out. I don't really want to imagine it. She said that her and Creep had been drinking a bit the previous night. She had a fair bit and was rather intoxicated. He ended up convincing her to try some more stuff. She said that they were making out and undressing, but it ended up pretty much him still dressed and her not, which I don't know is slightly weird to me. He convinced her to try oral and was rather rough, holding her head down and such. Being rough with squeezing stuff etc. She told him to be gentler and he did for a bit but then would go back to rough. She said that once it was done she started putting her clothes back on, but he wanted her to stay bare whilst they watched TV even though he was clothed, which she did for a bit despite feeling uncomfortable. He had worked today so they didn't stay up late and she ended up coming back here instead of sleeping over at his house. She feels sort of dirty and used. I tried explaining to her that it shouldn't be like that. It should be enjoyable for both parties. She seems to think her experience was just down to it being the first time and that she will get used to it. This is clearly a major red flag, but she doesn't seem to think so. Blinded by young love, I guess. Haven't told my brother or girlfriend about this. As far as sis is aware, they don't even know about the creep. Not sure if I should tell them or not. On one hand it might help them formulate a better argument when they do speak to her on Saturday, but on the other hand I don't think my brother would take that particularly well. Saturday evening me and my sister came over to theirs to have dinner. I was pretty nervous about how it was going to go, but I think after reading all your comments I was pretty prepared for it. Once we got settled, the girlfriend asked my sister if she could talk to her for a minute. My girlfriend talked to her about intimacy, how it should be, safety, relationships, that sort of thing. I wasn't there for it as I thought my sister would be more inclined to be open if there wasn't a blood relative sitting there staring. My girlfriend came out and got my brother and he went in there for a bit. Once I was just me outside, I eavesdropped a bit and heard a lot of tears. It seemed my sister was already aware how it was a weird relationship and wasn't entirely happy, but was too embarrassed to admit that the first boyfriend she'd managed to get and bragged about had turned out to be so horrible. At this point I went in and saw my sister crying in my brother's arms. She couldn't seem to stop. I'm guessing all the stuff she was bottling up about this whole ordeal was finally coming out now she had someone to speak to. My brother also looked like he was crying a little. Turns out what my sister had told me about their previous encounter wasn't completely accurate. Whilst it was true it was just oral. Supposedly he had been much rougher than she told me and called her nasty names, but she's adamant it wasn't rope. My brother looked really uncomfortable as she was talking about it, which I can't really blame him for. It must be absolutely horrible hearing your little sister speak about experiencing that. By this point it was obvious he was crying, but my sister couldn't see as she still had her face buried on his chest. His girlfriend looked pretty sad too. My brother was rubbing her back and telling her it's okay and that he wants her to feel free to talk to him anytime about anything. His girlfriend still thinks he's beating himself up about his perceived failings, and I can't imagine the new news is going to do him many favors in his head. At this point, sister seemed to be aware of his tears and sat up and they hugged for what felt like ages. I reassured my sister that everyone comes across bad boyfriends at some point in their life and it's nothing to be ashamed about. We talked a bit more. She said she was glad she could end it with the weirdo without feeling embarrassed and never wants to see him again. She said she wishes she could just forget the whole ordeal. She admitted to girlfriend in their earlier discussion that it wasn't like an age fetish thing, he just made her feel special for once, which I've read as a common tactic of these creeps. We talked a bit more, but since it was Saturday I can't remember any more specifics than I've already mentioned. After we were done chatting I went out onto the balcony to smoke, and when I came back brother and sister were on the sofa watching a film and girlfriend was cooking. She was curled up with her head on his chest and appeared to be happy. I'm hoping she was feeling the feeling I had the other week of being loved like we were children again. At one point she texted the creep that she didn't want to see him again, etc. At first he started texting almost begging, but then it turned to quiet nasty words and threats. He started calling and calling. Eventually my brother answered and stepped onto the balcony with her phone. I don't know what was said, but I heard some shouting and I can't imagine he was very friendly.